It's the Metro on WDET. I'm Robin Vincent. Michigan has long been home to Hmong refugees, families who fled war, lived in refugee camps, and rebuilt their lives here. Many fought alongside the U.S. during the Vietnam War. Yet today, some of their children and grandchildren are being torn from home. Last month, ICE agents arrested and detained around a dozen Hmong refugees in Detroit. ICE told the Metro the people arrested included known gang members and convicted criminals. But family members and State Representative Mai Song and State Senator Stephanie Chang say the cases are more complex than that. Last week, ICE deported 15 Hmong and Laotian refugees from Michigan. Several are still in ICE custody, including Lue Yang. Lue is a torque technician in the auto industry, a dad of 6, and president of the Hmong Family Association of Lansing. He was arrested at work in July and is now locked up in a federal detention center in Baldwin. His potential deportation could stem from a decades-old conviction that the state expunged. So today, we're discussing the human cost of President Trump's aggressive immigration enforcement in Michigan. We'll begin with Lue Yang's wife, Ann Vue, raising their kids while fighting to bring him home. Then we'll zoom out with Aisa Villarosa, an attorney with the Asian Law Caucus. And finally, we'll hear from State Senator Stephanie Chang. She's pushing for stronger protections here in Michigan. Ann, thank you so much for being here.
Hey, thank you for having me.
So before we get into Lue's detention, I want people to know who Lue Yang is at home. Could you tell us, what does a good day look like for your family with him there? Tell us a story that you think shows his role as a dad and as a leader in your family.
So for my husband, Lou, a typical day, he works third shift, right? So when he gets home in the morning, the first thing that he does is he would prepare breakfast for my grandma. Of course, you know, being part of the Asian community, we always have to have rice, right? So that's the first thing that he looks at, and then he always makes sure that he prepares a warm rice dish for my grandmother so that when she wakes up and she needs to take her medication, he always talks about making sure that she takes it with food. And then from there, he usually would rest up, and he knows that in my job and my career, it's very, what's the right word I'm looking for, right? So it's high demanding. And so he always makes sure that when I'm done, there's already dinner and ready to go. He'll take a quick nap if he has the time. Otherwise, him and the kids will be out in his garden with everything just happening. He felt that teaching the children how to garden, to self-sustain was highly important. So that would be one of the first things he does, and they'll be out there working his garden together. And then from there, he'll, come back. And, of course, he'll do reading time with the kids for about an hour a day. He loves reading. So he tries to make sure that they get a chance together. And then from there, he gets ready and he goes off to work. And so, of course, in the auto industry, they do work a good 6 days a week, longer hours than usual.
And it sounds like Lue is deeply, deeply involved in your household, and I'm guessing that his absence is profoundly felt by you and your kids right now.
Oh, absolutely. Even for a little bit there, because, our grandmother is getting a little bit, she's up there in age, and, we waited a few days before we said anything. And even if we try to make up the absence by cooking what he normally cooks for her in the morning, especially sausage and egg, she could tell, right, that it was different. He also loves cooking with the kids. And even that has been very different. I mean, I could swear I cook my nuggets exactly the same way he cooks it. But the kids, they'll tell me that, it tastes different.
They know the difference.
You know what I'm saying? And I'm like, I cooked it the same amount of time, but they're like, no, the crisp taste is different. He does baking with my daughter twice a week, and they love bake. They would bake literally and they use the waffle pan, so they make these waffle cakes together. And this is done twice a week. And I don't know what it is, and I try to do it with my daughter, and these waffle cakes are just not looking the same either. So yeah, it's been very devastating, and we miss him every day, and just the absence piece, trying to pick up what he does from mowing the lawn. Goodness, our grass has overgrown. To trying to help with, grandma's daily needs. It's been very difficult for our family.
Thank you for giving us a little bit more of a sense of who Lue is. I wonder if you could take us back to the day he was arrested at work. What happened in those first 48 hours, and how did you learn where he had been taken?
So I received a call from Lue at 6:37 in the morning that immigration has surrounded him. And, of course, he, oddly enough, took his bike out, his motorcycle to work that day. And, they presented themselves. He said they did present themselves, and they let him know that they, have in order to take him in. And so when he called me, the first thing I asked him was, are we going to see you again, right? And, I'm going to share a little bit of my story, because a lot of people are really curious about this piece. So this is my story, right? So he did ask them and plead with them if he can bring his bike home, because there's nobody in our family rides a or even licensed to ride a motorcycle, right? So he asked the officers if they can, if they can allow him to come back home. He has his family still at home, and they did get approval from their supervisor, and he did get a chance to come back home with his bike to see us. Of course, they would not allow him to come up to our property, so our driveway was completely blocked off. But when they came to us, the immigration officer did remove his mask and did talk to me very briefly. It's probably less than a minute or so, and kind of did give me an insight to the process and what it's going to look like, mentioning that they know what they know who he is, and they know what he does, and they don't want media attention around it. So I am grateful for that piece, because not everybody is as lucky as we are or as fortunate. Sure. And then I'll say that once he made it to Grand Rapids for processing, he was able to call quickly to let me know that they're processing his paperwork, and he would move forward to Baldwin. And so I think that piece of once he was shipped off to Baldwin became the complex piece, because I called over and over, and by the time it got to 8:00 p.m., he was finally registered in their system.
Now, Ann, I mean, I'm happy to hear that this process wasn't as shadowy as we know it often can be when people are apprehended and detained by federal immigration officials. I do want to briefly talk about the fact that Lue has an old conviction that was expunged under Michigan law. At what point did you learn that immigration authorities still consider that conviction to exist? And what was your reaction when you found out it could be used against him?
I was shocked, and I immediately feared for him, just because of who he is and what he does for our Michigan families here. And time and again, his immigration officer and many attorneys has always said, he's already been denied by, both the Laos and Thai embassy. They would never accept him because, one, he's not born. He's stateless, right? He's born in a refugee camp. And so, therefore, we have no repatriation act with Laos or Thailand, and they will never sign one with us because of our involvement with the CIA during the secret war and what we've done to their countries. So I was scared.
Yeah, and this is adding great complexity to Lue's situation here. The fact that he is stateless, there is no country for him to go back to. Can you tell us what Lue does as part of the larger Hmong community in Michigan? You describe him as really being a community leader for Hmong refugees here.
Yeah, so in the state of Michigan, we have about a little over just 9,000 Hmong families that resides here. And, our organization is, the overall community is a lot smaller compared to Wisconsin, Minnesota, and California, right? And North Carolina. And so, between 2022 and 2023, we were secretary and chair for our organization, and of course he was voted in and nominated by the members of the community, just because of his work ethics piece around what he's done. And of course, keep in mind, as a community leader, all of the positions are volunteer based, right? And so he has literally brought our Hmong community out and gave us a voice that we do exist in the state of Michigan, right? And as president, he's literally championed and advocated for different things with, especially for our veterans. I think most importantly is honoring our Hmong Special Guerrilla Units, which is the Michigan chapter here. Compared to many other states, we're smaller, so it's not as visible. But what he did differently was he brought the community out, invited all allies to join us, really championed who we are into the community and the contribution that we have greatly provided in Michigan, or in general, our capital, right? And he led efforts to honor our Hmong veterans, especially the secret war in the Laos. He really partnered with them and, the different state officials to secure, a proclamation that we can now call our own right here, which is the Hmong Special Guerrilla Unit Veterans Recognition Day. Last year, really securing our first tribute that honors not just only our organization, but our community as a whole, where last year was 48th anniversary of the first Hmong refugee that arrived and built their home here in Michigan. So he's done a lot of great work for the community.
And before we take a quick break here, for listeners who might not be familiar with Hmong culture, how does your culture shape your family's day-to-day life? And what has this detention meant for preserving those traditions and values? I mean, we just zoomed out and looked at the vital role that Lue's been playing in the broader Hmong community. What about at home when it comes to Hmong culture and traditions?
So in Hmong culture and tradition, the men are always viewed as a bit more valuable, and they are usually the breadwinner. Everybody does have gender roles, right? And it still plays in today's world. With Lue, he has never viewed our relationship or me as, okay, I'm the woman. So here's, I need to stay home. I need to cook, raise the children, right? In Hmongs, I think that a lot of the past trauma has brought the resilience piece where we stay very tight-knit within the community. And for him, he has all he's not he and he's also the second oldest too, right? And so our older brother lives out of state now, and so he's taken in the role of helping and supplying for the family. And so most importantly, he has, in our relationship, he has really encouraged his sisters, really encouraged me as the wife to really chase the American dream, to really, chase the American dream while he helps without any complaint. Really promote family values is so important to us. All together, between Lue and I, we have 49 nieces and nephews that we stay very close in with. And I can honestly say that every year, even if we don't have much, Robin, we don't have much. We don't come from wealth. And he always makes sure that every niece and nephew gets $20, even if it's just 20. It's not much, but 20 for each birthday. Far and near, even if we can't be there, that he knows that it's their birthdays. Celebrates, our grandmother. She can choose to stay with her children, but her and Grandpa have always chosen to stay with us because of his big heart. Making sure that she stays healthy so she can enjoy the many more generations to come. I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
And so his absence has just been really missed. And even this past weekend, the last weekend, we celebrated both of our two children's birthdays. Our children's birthdays have always been really small because he's looking for the memory piece of it, right? And, to be absent from all of this, and including all of the nieces and nephews' birthdays this month, even going to see him, he's like, don't forget, you've got two that has birthdays this month. And it's just these little things that reminds me of just what being human is. And, I'm so sorry. But yes.
And thank you so much for opening a window into your family's life and opening a window into more of who Lue Yang is. Ann Vue, her husband is Lue Yang, a Hmong refugee who is detained right now by ICE. We're going to take a quick break. When we return, we'll step back from Lue's story just a bit and look at the bigger legal picture, how expunged convictions and old refugee cases collide with today's immigration enforcement. This is The Metro on WDET. Stay with us. Metro on WDET. I'm Robin Vincent. Last week, a number of Hmong and Laotian refugees living in Michigan were deported. At least a few are still in custody here in the U.S., including Lue Yang. We've been speaking with Lue's wife, Ann Vue, about her husband's life and his detainment. He was born in a refugee camp in Thailand after the Vietnam War and came to the U.S. at a young age. America is the only country he's ever known. In July, he was detained for a criminal conviction that was expunged years ago, but it's now the basis for his potential deportation. Now, Lue Yang isn't alone. Multiple Hmong refugees in Michigan were detained last month, and many were deported to Laos last week. Nationwide, aggressive immigration enforcement under the Trump administration has sent shockwaves through many communities. ICE told the Metro it's detaining people with criminal histories. Advocates say it's more complex than that.
To understand why this is happening and what legal options exist, I want to turn to Aisa Villarosa, an attorney with the Asian Law Caucus. Aisa, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me, Robin.
So, Aisa, in Michigan, we've seen Hmong and Laotian refugees detained after receiving letters from federal immigration officers, sometimes even at routine check-ins. Can you explain the pattern you're seeing in these arrests and why it raises due process concerns?
Absolutely. And we just heard Ann talk so much about the simple, invaluable joys that have been stripped away. And as you mentioned, this is happening both across Michigan and across the country. Why we really focus on due process, even if there are big differences between proceedings in immigration court and state criminal court, nonetheless, every human being is entitled in this country to fair procedure, particularly under the Immigration and Nationality Act. This is, for myself, I am a Filipino American. My family came here through this same act, decades ago. It has never been perfect, but this year, through this administration, there have been glaring departures from essentially how the law is administered, and I hate to say it, but how the government, in some cases, is violating that law. For this case, for Lue and for the 15 Hmong and Lao loved ones who are now either in removal proceedings or in Laos themselves, a lot of this started in March of this year. So a not very publicized data point that my organization, Asian Law Caucus, is both looking at and has filed Freedom of Information Act requests on is that in March, there was a draft travel ban list that leaked. On this list, countries such as Laos, countries such as Bhutan were placed on this list. And our theory is that the State Department essentially brokered some sort of deal with Laos to allow these deportations to happen. But what is truly remarkable is both the covert nature of this. We're chasing a paper trail that so far has not been made available to the public. And that is why, similar to Lue's case, we are seeing folks who are anchors of communities, beloved family members, stripped from their families after often decades of living peacefully in their communities.
So what you're saying here is that historically, Laos hasn't accepted deportees from the U.S. That's been the reality for decades.
That is correct.
And that has now changed, and you're saying it has been done in this clandestine fashion.
That's right. Anne earlier mentioned that there is no repatriation agreement between the U.S. and Laos. And as an immigration advocate, this is really critical. Prior to this administration, we were not seeing en masse the deportations of folks to countries that simply did not accept them, or in the case of many of the clients that Asian Law Caucus works with, there is sometimes even a false acceptance. This actually has happened with Bhutanese refugees, for example, who are actually expelled from the border of Bhutan upon deportation. Prior to this administration, the way that removal proceedings worked, often there is a travel document that is issued by the country who has agreed to accept someone. There is then a process in court where someone has the opportunity to assert fear of being taken to that country. In these cases, neither of those things are happening to the degree of the law, and that is why we're really concerned.
I want to zoom in on Lue Yang's situation for a moment, if we could. His conviction was expunged. And most people, Aisa, they hear expunged and they assume it's gone. This has been wiped off of my record. Why doesn't an expungement protect someone in immigration court?
That's a great question. And a lot of it turns on these two separate tracks of criminal court and federal immigration court. And so if Lue had an expunged record, that is not the same as having a vacated record. As immigration attorneys, often we pursue channels of vacating a record, And it might sound the same, but it really depends on which path you pursue. And this is really heartbreaking, right? Because in essence, the core of this is the same, that Lue Yang has been an amazing community member, right, for decades, and that he has a record. It is expunged, and why does that not matter to an immigration court? But often in these immigration proceedings, another thing that's different is the immigration judge is often judge and jury in themselves. And so there are myriad hurdles that folks have to overcome. But I would say the biggest hurdle, and this is true of Lue's case and many others, we often see folks who picked up a record when they were very young, a minor, a student. You're in high school. We've all done silly things. Often, if you don't have the money to appoint an attorney, you receive a court-appointed attorney, but that attorney will often only tell you about your rights under state court. And so my guess is, and this happens time and time again, if Lue Yang had an attorney, he was not apprised of what that would do if he took a plea to his immigration case. And this is huge because sometimes someone can be told, take this plea, you can go home sooner. That might be true in the short term, but that could also mean that decades into the future, you could have ICE agents coming to your workplace, at home, etc.
Aisa, this has me thinking about America's criminal justice system more broadly, because traditionally, America has embraced the idea that people, even with criminal histories, can rise, rehabilitate, and contribute. But it seems refugees and immigrants are being denied that opportunity. And from what you're saying, it sounds like at an accelerated pace under the Trump administration. Could you explain how the rollback of rehabilitation pathways is shaping or eroding hope and stability for these communities?
Absolutely. And I would challenge all the listeners here today to really take a good look at their local budget, at any budget, because what we're seeing is a historic diversion of funding to this military machine. And to take a step back and to think through the deportation flight, for example, that happened on August 11th, which took 15 of our Michigan friends and family to Laos. This was a hefty military flight. So we're talking 50, 60 hours where you're shackled on numerous parts of your body. To go to the bathroom, you are actually still shackled and accompanied by an ICE officer. And because we have a scrappy but dedicated team of advocates and organizers across the globe, that is only how we knew this flight was happening. Under the guise of national security, ICE didn't tell families what was happening. There was a mad scramble as folks were moved from Baldwin, Michigan, which is now the largest detention facility in the Midwest, to Texas, and then to a staging area in Louisiana that is popularly known as a human FedEx, because they just simply ship folks out to countries so quickly. During this 50-hour flight that stopped at Guantanamo, then stopped at Laos and Vietnam, and also stopped at the Marshall Islands, we are truly seeing the mass separation of families who, as we've learned from Ann, have not just been here for decades, but have given so much to this country, who are also welcomed in as refugees after giving so much overseas, doubly, triply vetted through refugee resettlement, and in Lue's case, literally built the Motor City, right, as an auto worker.
I do want to reiterate something you just described, Aisa, for listeners to think about a little more deeply, and that is a 50-hour deportation flight where people are shackled the whole time.
Shackled the whole time. These are not your Delta flights. These are military planes with very, very scarce conditions. And another thing to be mindful of is prior to this flight, in facilities that are called staging facilities, like the one that our 15 Michiganders were at in Louisiana, you are sleeping on concrete floors. You are denied food. Eerily, advocates have not been allowed to visit facilities like this. It's really meant to whisk folks away as quickly as possible. And the other challenge that Ann mentioned that I'd love to uplift is this threat of statelessness. And because home is here for this community, you are essentially taken to a country where you have no anchor point. You might not know the language, you don't know the people, and you have no documentation. So you are not just starting from zero, but you are grappling with almost a double expulsion.
Aisa, before we turn to Senator Stephanie Chang, I'm wondering from your perch, is this everything you're describing thus far? It's important for us to contextualize America's broken immigration system and the fact that former presidents Obama and Biden both deported a lot of people. What should listeners understand about how immigration enforcement has shifted? In other words, how unprecedented is this moment, or is it?
Yeah. That's a great question, and I'm a visual learner, so here in the studio I see a volume button. This moment is like the volume that was at level 2 being turned up to level 10. Throughout our country's history, as we've talked about, this system has not been perfect, and yet we are seeing new targeting of scope and scale of communities who, prior to this year, this month, thought, it's not me. And I can say that as an Asian American, many of our communities have thought this, but the reality is we are seeing not just the targeting of folks who might have some sort of criminal record, but in Michigan and across the country, we've seen things like the takedown of rights of naturalized citizens, folks who are using their First Amendment rights, and so on. And so I would just ask our listeners to often step back, see those broader patterns, and just keep asking why. Why is this happening?
Attorney Aisa Villarosa. This is the Metro on WDET. I'm Robin Vincent. We've been discussing the recent detainment of a Hmong refugee named Lue Yang. He was arrested at work in July and is now locked up in a federal detention center in Baldwin. An old conviction expunged from his record years ago is the basis for his potential deportation. He's among multiple refugees ICE has recently detained. ICE says these folks have criminal histories and that one was a known gang member. But in cases like Lue's, there's more to the story. State lawmakers have been trying to respond. I recently spoke with Michigan's only Hmong American legislator, Representative Mai Song, who's been sounding the alarm about this. State Senator Stephanie Chang has also been pressing ICE for answers, and she's looking at legislative protections for immigrant communities. Senator Chang, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having us on.
So you've been following these cases closely. I'm wondering, what have you learned about how these detentions unfolded here in Michigan, and what's the latest on Lue Yang and others who remain in custody?
Yeah, no, thanks very much. I have so much admiration for Ann and the other family members that we've had the opportunity to meet. And also want to really give a lot of thanks to Representative Song, who has been leading so courageously on this crisis that we're in. You know, I think that there's a lot of things that are at play right now, and while we're trying to find ways to support those that have been deported as well as their family members that are here, we're also, of course, trying to really fight for Lue, as well as others that we know are still in Baldwin. I recently had a chance to communicate with a woman named Kamla, whose brother is a Lao refugee who is also up at Baldwin. So the story is a bit different, but definitely similar story of survival and resilience, also fighting along U.S. troops during the Vietnam War, and also born in a refugee camp. And, her brother is a roofing contractor, a devoted member of his church, and a father of a 7-year-old. I think that we're all trying to find ways to support both the family members who are just really, really struggling to find ways to cope with what's happening, and then also find ways to potentially get these neighbors, family members, loved ones released. I want to just sort of echo what Aisa said earlier about the fact that what's happening is really unprecedented. And so we, of course, know that deportations have been happening for a long time, but never to the scope that they have been happening now. And so, sometimes the rhetoric is around dangers to our community and all of these things. But what we know is that when you actually learn about the individuals, when you learn about Lue Yang, when you learn about Kamla's brother Kamse, these are not violent offenders. These are not people who are a danger to the community. And I think that it's really important that our immigration officials are actually taking the time to learn about who an individual is, what the context of their community coming to this country is, and all of these things.
Senator Chang, this has me wondering because what you're saying is that federal immigration officials are not taking the time to learn enough about these individuals. So what role then can the state realistically play? You are a state senator. Are you looking at legislation such as guaranteeing access to counsel, requiring judicial warrants for cooperation, or let's say funding for immigrant defense? How fast could measures like that move in the State House?
Yeah, well, we definitely have a couple of things that will be introduced soon that I'm happy to chat about, but I do think ultimately change needs to happen at the federal level. So I'll mention a couple things there and then also go down to the state level. At the federal level, I mean, obviously ICE does not have to be doing things the way that they are doing right now. And I would hope that our Michigan delegation and Congress as a whole will take a look at some of the really common sense things like codifying the sensitive locations policy that existed under Trump 1.0.
Meaning that people cannot be apprehended in places like churches and schools.
Schools, hospitals,
but
courthouses.
That's not happening right now.
That's not happening right now. So that policy was rescinded earlier this year. But we know that there actually are states that passed laws that did codify that into their state laws. And so we are looking to do something like that in Michigan. I've been working alongside Representative Mary Cavanaugh, who's the chair of the Latino Caucus. And so that's something that we're looking at, as well as the mask issue. No law enforcement officer, period, should be masked. It's scary, and it does nothing to help with public safety. But at the federal level, I'll just go back to the federal level real quick. I think, a couple times on this show so far, we've talked about the issue of statelessness. There needs to be something done about this. And the federal government is really the entity that needs to take that on. We should not be deporting stateless people to countries where they have no ties and where they weren't born to begin with. So there's a number of different things that I would hope that we can take a look at. And then, of course, also this issue of and a conviction from so long ago that was expunged, or other types of low-level offenses that there was no violent, behavior. Those are things that need to be deprioritized.
Senator, in the last 20 seconds we have here, you're Michigan's first Asian American woman elected to the state legislature. Given what families like Ann's are going through right now, why does that representation matter? And what does it mean for you to be in this fight at this moment? Again, we only have 20 seconds.
Yep. Well, I think about the fact that Rep. Song had folks literally contacting her, and that I had family members directly contacting me. I think about the fact that if we weren't there, I'm not actually sure how we would have found out about these cases. But it's truly been a partnership alongside Asian Law Caucus, Rising Voices, Michigan Immigrant Rights Center. There's a whole team of folks really trying to help elevate these stories and push for change.
Michigan State Senator Stephanie Chang, Aisa Villarosa from the Asian Law Caucus, and Ann Vue, wife of Lue Yang, a detained Hmong refugee. Thank you all so much for joining us today on the Metro.
Thank you.
This is WDET-FM, Detroit Public Radio, your connection to news, music, and conversation. We'll be right back after the news from NPR and WDET. This is the Metro. Stay with us.